So this is a webinar that's jointly being co-hosted by WHO and UN Environment. We're really pleased to have you here. I see there's 100 and nearly 200 people, and we're still receiving guests. So thanks very much. So we have a great agenda and a great number of speakers here that I think you'll appreciate, and we certainly appreciate you. And maybe we can just go to the slide on the agenda so that our participants have an understanding of what is happening. And I failed to introduce myself, but my name is Bruce Gordon, and I'm the unit head of water sanitation hygiene at WHO. So thank you so much for being here. And I see at least my slide is a little bit covered by a second slide. So I think we're seeing two screens. I don't know who's controlling it. Maybe Dave. So that's perfect. So you can see we're going to have an overview. Well, first we're going to have some reflections, some high-level reflections on this guidance. Then we will actually give you a very nice overview of what's in the guidance itself. Some of it's complex, so we'll go through it. Then we'll have some implications for the global AMR agenda. That is the first panel. And then the second panel, we're going to dive into implications for users. And then we'll get into all the nice stuff with inspection, auditing, and from the perspective of manufacturers and regulators. But I think first I wanted to just note to you that the webinar is being recorded. You do have the opportunity to put comments and questions in the chat. And maybe if we have time, we can pick up some of those and bring them to the panelists. But without further ado, I'd like to pass the microphone to Dr. Maria Neira, who is the Director for Environment, Climate, and Health at WHO. She's actually my supervisor, and I have to say I have nice bios, Maria, for everyone but you. But so let me just say a little bit that you have obviously worked at WHO for a long time. You were the Vice Minister of Health in Spain. You've won numerous awards. But I did have to say that because, yeah, to give you a more complete bio. So over to you.
Thank you, Bruce, and hello, everyone. Pleasure to join you. Bruce, when you opened the webinar, there were less than 200 participants, and we have now 261. So it's definitely a webinar that is raising a lot of interest, and I'm extremely pleased to see that. You know, it's never enough what we are doing to prevent antimicrobial resistance. You were talking about my CV. Well, one of the most important things on my CV, I think, is the fact that I am a public health officer, somebody who believes on public health. And therefore, I think the issue of antimicrobial resistance is we are all convinced, all of those who work in public health, we are convinced that this is one of the challenging public health issues that we are facing at the moment and for which we need to provide solutions coming from different sectors. So here we are. Yesterday, we launched this new guidance, and it's the first time that WHO is working on something like that. You have a beautiful one in color, but it's a guidance on wastewater and solid waste management of manufacturing of antibiotics. And of course, we don't want to single out the pharma sector in particular. This is more a question of how the environmental pieces will contribute to address a problem like antimicrobial resistance. And this is part as well of our strategy that those of us who work on environment and health will look at. In the past, for instance, we were trying to do this environmentally friendly, greening the health sector. We are now trying to reduce the carbon footprint that the health sector is having and therefore mitigating the causes of climate change. We are trying to reduce the impact we have anytime we organize a vaccination campaign. We need to look at the plastic that is generated and all the waste that is generated. When we distributed impregnated bed nets for malaria, for instance, we need to be conscious of that as well. At the beginning, our colleagues of malaria, they were feeling a little bit challenged by taking care of the impregnated nets, but now no one will accept to put in place a public health program without looking at what the consequences on the environment would be. And let me clarify something for you. It's not because we are concerned about the environment, that maybe we are as a citizens or on a private life, but we are concerned about how the environment that is not a healthy one will have a negative impact in our health. So our main mission as WHO, as healthcare professionals, is looking at environmental health. How many diseases we could prevent if we make sure that we have a healthy environment. And our colleagues from UNEP, I'm sure they will join from the other end, and we join forces on creating a healthy environment, because it's the best reassurance that we will have healthy population. So I hope you will appreciate this guidance. Personally, I think it's extremely timely and contributing to this challenge of antimicrobial, how to prevent antimicrobial resilience. I look forward to seeing you all, or part of you, represented in New York at the General Assembly, where we will still keep trying and pushing for WASH, and making sure that when we discuss about climate change or air pollution, everybody recognizes that one of the first things we need to do is to make sure that our environment is healthy, and to be healthy, we need to look at the issue of WASH, water and sanitation, hygiene, and protecting it for everyone will be our best protection for the health of our people. So back to you, Bruce. The time I'm talking, we are almost 300 people. So let's maintain this level of interest with the very interesting presentations that will follow, Mike. Thank you. Back to you, Bruce. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Maria, and I'm sure it'll be really exciting for you to be at UNGA. And there's so many really great references to this, to the importance of reducing the concentrations of pharmaceutical residues in wastewater at the political declaration at UNGA. So I think with that, I would like now to invite Professor Ramanan Laxminarayan for some high-level reflections. Ramanan, you're the founder and the director of the Center for Disease Dynamics, Economics, and Policy in Washington, D.C. and in New Delhi, and a senior research scholar at Princeton University. You have many kind of affiliations with different universities. You've worked very closely with WHO, so we're really honored that you're with us. I know you're also leading a number of boards. I think Allison will put your full bio in so everyone can see where your background. So over to you, Ramanan.
Thank you, Bruce, and it's really a pleasure to be here at the launch of this very impressive set of guidelines that has been quite a while in the making. Now, as all of you know, AMR is a serious issue, but beyond that, bacterial infections are a serious issue. 7.7 million people die each year because of bacterial infections, both treatable ones and those that can't be treated, and of which about 1.3 deaths are associated or are directly attributable to drug resistance, and nearly 5 million are associated with drug resistance. And this is a problem that connects high-income countries, middle-income countries, and low-income countries. Everyone is in the same boat here. And, in our quest to think about drug resistance, we sometimes forget about the fact that access to antibiotics is still a challenge for most populations around the world, and lack of access kills more people than drug resistance does. Now, one of the efforts to be able to make sure that those access barriers are surmounted is to ensure that there's more localized manufacturing and distributed pharmaceutical manufacturing, not just for antibiotics, but for many other pharmaceuticals. And all manufacturing, as we know, involves some amount of effluent discharge, which has consequences. But in this particular case, with antibiotic manufacture, there's a potential to make an already serious problem worse. Many people have written on this, notably Joachim Larsen, for instance, showing that small antibiotic manufacturers, but some large ones as well, put out effluent that contains extremely high concentrations of antibiotics, potentially even higher than those than the levels of concentrations that a physician may hope to get in a patient's body if they were on treatment for antibiotics. And the consequences, of course, are that we're essentially creating a petri dish in which we are creating the ideal conditions for drug resistance to to be created and then thrive. And there are very few places that enable this to happen. To be sure, antibiotics are being excreted every day from humans, from animals, but these pockets of high concentration are something that could get us into a lot of trouble. And with now the greater emphasis on localized and distributed manufacturing, we have an opportunity to make sure that new facilities are up to standard and don't create problems, which then worsen the problem they're trying to solve, which is really of access to effective antibiotics. So we have to make sure that access is very central, ability to make antibiotics and LMICs is critical, but we need to make sure that we don't do it in ways that endanger local populations. Now, what does this report do? If you've all had a chance to see this, it's a really impressive piece of work. I was thrilled to be a reviewer for the report. It sets out standards. Now, there are places where the standards are at some variance with where the industry is at, but by and large, they all point in the same direction. And I think this report offers a lot more clarity on these standards than what we've had so far. And certainly the input and the feedback process makes sure that we have a set of standards that are now widely accepted even prior to them being put out. And that's very important. An important step forward of these standards and these guidelines is the need for transparency and reporting. So it is not just enough if a facility meets the standards, they have to be transparent, and we need the reporting, and we need to make sure that those data are available to the folks who would make decisions on which antibiotics they would buy, what they would purchase, for investors, and certainly for customers as well. Now, we tend to focus on the manufacturing end of things. We tend not to think so much about the disposal of unused antibiotics. But here too, we have a significant issue, and there's a lot more to be done here, which is certainly a core focus for folks interested in this area. Now, at the UN General Assembly this year on September 26th, we have an opportunity to really take this conversation forward. And at least the last draft that I've seen, I'm delighted that these issues have received significant attention, perhaps not quantitative targets, but at least they have been recognized. So the UNGA draft recognizes that pharmaceutical production, including manufacturing operations and waste, and effluent generation and management can impact the evolution and spread of antimicrobial resistance in the environment, and also calls for consistency in national regulatory oversight as well as coordinated global action. It also emphasizes the need for access, which means that we need sustained, resilient, and sustainable manufacturing of existing antibiotics, both through investing in local and regional manufacturing capabilities to meet demands in human and veterinary medicine, and to encourage continued production and delivery of these products to meet market demands. Keep in mind that in many cases, we have antibiotic shortages, including in high-income countries. And so we don't want to hamper manufacturing. We want to enhance manufacturing, but do it in ways that don't make the resistance problem worse. And importantly, the UNGA Declaration calls for prioritizing the sustainable production of antimicrobials. Everywhere the word sustainable is used is really in the context of thinking of not making the MR problem worse and reducing selection pressure. And here, the development and incentivizing of an adoption of manufacturing standards to reduce the risk of developing antibiotic resistance and aquatic ecotoxicity is really critical. So what are the challenges? We now have a great report. You'll hear a lot of detail around this. Setting standards, as we all know, is just a first step. That doesn't get things done. We need regulatory bodies to act. We need procurers and consumers to get on board, and guidelines can easily sit on shelves and gather dust unless there is a push to adopt them broadly and quickly. In order to do that, we do have to not just enforce the standards, we have to incentivize the adoption of these manufacturing standards, which means that, if there are perhaps purchasing policies which say that we will only purchase antibiotics that are certified to have been made in plants that meet the WHO standards, that's what we really need to see. And I think the guidelines now need to be turned into a criteria to ensure that antibiotic manufacture is safe and is sustainable for the long term. Now, we could have had stronger language, perhaps with the UNGA, to get countries to directly adopt these guidelines, but it's not too late for that to happen. It can still happen, perhaps in a few months or a year. And there are other opportunities where we do need greater sustained support, and all of you are particularly important here, to make sure that the word gets out that there is now a set of guidelines that are now widely agreed upon and which can be used to make sure that antibiotic manufacture is safe. Now, my closing thoughts are really to do with this idea of sustainability balanced with affordability. We know that sometimes environmental sustainability does carry a cost. And we sometimes might worry, well, what about if these small plants, they can't afford to make antibiotics with the effluent standards that are being imposed on them? Will they shut down? Would that mean the end of affordable antibiotics for many people? And I don't think that, I think that's a false dichotomy because we have to realize, and anytime we hear that argument, we have to realize that simply making cheap antibiotics in an environmentally irresponsible way risks messing up the very affordable antibiotics that could save the lives of patients. So in other words, simply providing cheap antibiotics where we have created resistance would result in a much greater tragedy for many patients and NMICs. So I think we have an opportunity. We have these guidelines. We also have what I hope will be a period of extended and expanded antibiotic manufacturing in many low and middle income countries, especially in Africa. And I hope that these countries will take these guidelines on board right from the outset. And there is a responsibility of high income countries to help with technical assistance, to share share ways of being able to follow these disposal schemes or the effluent management schemes in such a way that it doesn't inordinately place a burden on the manufacturer, and they're able to do this in an affordable way. Now, there are certainly lots of challenges to figure out as we go forward. No question, this is not going to be easy. But I really congratulate WHO for a job extremely well done and one that only WHO could do, which is to bring people together and convene a process, which then results in a superb document, which now it's incumbent on all of us to do the heavy lift to take forward. With that, I'll stop here and thanks very much.
Oh, thanks so much, Ramanan, for really setting the scene for the document, the rationale, caution around ensuring that there is continued access of antibiotics and also issues around implementation and opportunities for the future. So I think with that, we are ready to hear a review and an overview of the document itself. And I'm very pleased to introduce Kate Medlicott. She is the team lead for sanitation and wastewater. It's a team that has co-led the development of the guidance with others in WHO who you'll hear from. She's also the focal point for AMR and the environment. And I just, before Kate, you go, I wanted to acknowledge you have a little bit of an audio issue, so apologize to everyone for that, but hopefully you can hear what Kate has to say. And I also, of course, want to acknowledge that this, as Ramanan was saying, was done with a wide group of experts, with engagement of industry and others, and acknowledging the partnership of the UN Environment Program. So over to you, Kate.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I hope you can hear me okay. And yeah, I'm just really happy to be here. You've all set me up wonderfully for this quick overview. You will see the QR code previously, and you'll see it again at the end. So if you want to download this and really dig into the detail, it's there. I will just give you a once over lightly now to give you a flavor. So I think it's been the point has been well made in the opening that antibiotic pollution levels from manufacturing have been documented as very high and are largely unregulated, and we have this need to preserve the effectiveness of antibiotics. It's also been called for by a lot of different international bodies, most recently the G7 as well as UNEP and the WHO Executive Board. And we're really here to try and provide some independent scientific-based guidance for inclusion of targets within the mechanisms of a number of different target audiences, which I'll get to. And we've really tried to work with this principle of progressive improvement, because it's absolutely clear that we need to protect the global supply of antimicrobials while also making this shift towards cleaner production. Just a quick overview of the development of the guidance. WHO has very rigorous processes for doing this. So we did this with a steering group across WHO. You'll hear from some of those on the panel. A really amazing group of experts who I'd like to say thank you to all now for their very detailed contributions. We had a lot of rounds of review, a consultation with industry, and a public hearing as well, which brings us to this point of the launch and the upcoming UNGA high-level meeting where we're anticipating a commitment within the political declaration. So in terms of the target audience, so WHO guidance is not binding in its own right, but it provides a basis for other entities to take it up into their mechanisms. So the key one, of course, is regulatory bodies, either buyers of medicine or regulators within the countries that manufacture, procurers, generic substitution schemes, third-party inspectors, and not least industrial actors themselves at all stages of the chain and their investors. In terms of what's in the scope, so this covers all antibiotics and all steps of the manufacturing chain. You'll see that we're partnering with UNEP, and a key reason for that is because we include targets for both emergence of resistance as well as ecotoxicological effects. There's a heavy emphasis on liquid effluent, and I will sort of dig into the components of that next, but also covering solid waste and separate assessments for any site producing antibiotics. You can see the things that are out of scope there. I'm not going to read them all one by one, but that sort of gives you a sense of the focus in on antibiotics specifically and a strong emphasis on liquid effluent. So if there's something to really sort of grasp in all of this to get your head around this guidance, is this conceptual framework, which has three elements. The first is setting targets, which needs to be done by the target audiences I just mentioned. There's the implementation of the risk management plans themselves, which needs to be done by industry, and then the verification of performance, which needs to happen by independent third-party auditors, and taken together these provide a robust system for making sure that targets are met and checked. So I just want to go into those a little bit now, the types of targets. For liquid effluent, we have two types of water quality target. One is for the antibiotics in the liquid effluent. The second is for, well, what is referred to as zero liquid discharge. In fact, there is no targets for zero liquid discharge, but if in fact there is a sort of not strictly ZLD, we're calling it, then the same water quality targets apply. For resistant bacteria in the liquid effluent and solid waste, there's technology targets, which you can see there in the target list. When we get to the liquid effluent, there's an awful lot to absorb here, so I'm just going to point out some key features to look at yourself when you have some time to review the document. First is you'll see that there is a large table of PNEX for resistance selection and ecological effects covering 125 different antibiotics. You'll notice that there's these two levels, good and stringent, allowing for progressive improvement, and two different types of analysis, chemical analysis and mass balance, where the more stringent levels have chemical analysis only, and also elements of the good classification also require chemical analysis because of some of the shortcomings of mass balance for those for fermentation and chemical synthesis processes. Also, you'll notice there are fixed dilution factors in both the good and stringent levels, and no dilution factor within the stringent for PNEX for resistance selection. Finally, you'll see there's different levels of treatment, so both in a in-house treatment plant, a common effluent treatment plant, or a municipal treatment plant, where if it's going to a municipal treatment plant for the stringent level, then it needs to already meet the PNEC values. Okay, moving now to the risk management plans. As I mentioned, these are the parts that need to be done by industry themselves, and that needs to include the implementation of the risk management plan and internal audits, and to progressively meet those targets. Some of you will be quite familiar with a hazard and critical control point approach. This adopts that same approach, which is common in many risk management processes. And these risk management plans can be either standalone or incorporated into a broader risk management exercise for the manufacturing facility, so long as that is identifiable within there. And it's the responsibility of the manufacturer to engage the auditor and to make those results available to the public. I'm not going to talk you through all of this, but these are the typical steps of a risk management plan, and recognizing that that's an ongoing process that needs to be periodically reviewed. The third element is the audit and certification. So this is the part that verifies performance against the targets, and it's the manufacturer's responsibility to engage the third-party auditor and provide their internal audit results. It uses a consistent framework, so there's opportunity for comparison and transparency globally, and it's done mostly on a desk-based review with mostly announced visits. We recognise that the number and capacity of auditors needs to increase to deliver on this function, and that there's specific expertise that's needed within industry and auditors themselves in order to carry out this function. Which then sort of takes me to the implementation considerations. There's a lot in this, and getting to full implementation of all these elements is going to take some time. So that's where we re-emphasize this important principle of progressive improvement, and call out some key areas where the guidance needs to be sort of contextualized. So specifically looking at adaptation for specific contexts, clarifying the roles and responsibilities in that specific context. So we have these three functions, but the specific application needs clarity of roles and responsibilities. There needs to be adequate time for scaling of capacity for each of the target audiences, and those target audiences need to consider which levels, good or stringent, they're going to apply, and the pace of that progressive improvement that's realistic. There's also need for additional work on chemical analysis methods in the case of some antibiotics, and a need for the use of incentive mechanisms, particularly taking into account the cost of implementation, and perhaps applying those incentives firstly to those early adopters. Oh, sorry. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'd like to hand back to you, Bruce, to bring us into the panel. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Kate, for giving us an overview and also a little bit of a taster. And of course, there's a lot of specifics there that are elaborated further in the document, which people are, I'm sure, accessing as we speak. So we're having our first panel, which I mentioned is about implications within the global AMR agenda. And I'm really pleased that we have three amazing panelists with us. So the first is Ludovic Bernaudot, and maybe just to give you a sentence, Mr. Bernaudot, he's a program officer at the United Nations Environment Program with 20 years experience in the development and management of projects associated with mercury. And he has a lot of experience, and we're going to put, Ludovic, we're going to put your bio in the chat. We also have Valeria Gigante, and she's a clinical pharmacologist and a senior regulatory affairs and health policy specialist with 14 years of experience in public health and a team lead at WHO's AMR division. And of course, we've worked very closely with you, Valeria, to get this guidance up and running. And your bio will be put there too. And then also Stephanie Croft, who is a chemist by training and currently working with WHO as a technical officer in the inspection services group of the consolidated WHO pre-qualification team for medicines, vaccines, devices, and diagnostics and vector control products. So there's a whole array of work that you're doing there. So I think I'd like to address my first question to Ludovic. if you're ready. So last year, UN Environment released the Bracing for Superbugs report. You were heavily involved in that in preparation for the UNGA. And how do you see environment being represented now in the AMR agenda? And really, how far are we and what comes next?
Thank you, Bruce. I hope you can all hear me because I couldn't attend the test session. I just wanted to flag also that the bio you read is not the one I sent, so maybe we should check before posting. Just a note. So to answer your question, for us the release of the Bracing for Superbug report by UNEP last year was a significant milestone in recognizing the critical role of the environment that the environment plays in the AMR agenda. The report underscored the environment's important role in the development, transmission, and spread of AMR. Since the report's release, we've seen a growing acknowledgement of the environment as a crucial component of the AMR One Health approach, which integrates human, animals, and the environment health. This shift is increasingly reflected in the global discussion, including in the preparation for the upcoming UN General Assembly high-level meetings on AMR, as you rightly mentioned. Environment consideration have been integrated into AMR strategies and action plans at both national and global level, emphasizing the importance of the environment surveillance, regulation of wastewater / waste discharge, and sustainable practices across industries. And I think that's where this WHO UNEP guidance comes into play. We're working directly with the industry because the wastewater that is released from the operation is released directly into the environment. However, there's still much work to be done. We need to continue to push for stronger global coordination and implementation of environmental measures, particularly in low and middle-income countries, where the impact of AMR can be the most severe. Moving forward, the focus will be on translating these strategies into actionable policies and ensuring that the environment remains a priority in the global environment AMR agenda. What's next, you ask me? What's next involves further embedding environmental actions into the AMR One Health response, raising awareness on environmental impact of AMR and best practices, increasing investment in innovative technologies and practices that prevent and reduce antimicrobials and AMR in the environment, and ensuring that these efforts are supported by a robust international framework. As we prepare for UNGA, our role is to solidify these commitments and continue to drive forward the interaction of environment consideration into every aspect of the fight against AMR. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ludovic. It's wonderful to have your perspectives. And now I'd like to go to Valeria. So you were co-leading this guidance in the team, and previously you also worked with JMP. So we often hear concerns that addressing waste will impact on supply or cost of medicine. So how do you see this guidance affecting the discussion? I hope I got that right.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bruce. And good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone. This actually gives me the opportunity to share some reflection about this common concern. Indeed, addressing at the same time environmental protection, AMR, and potential ecological effect without compromising access might sound really challenging. However, you should remember that this guidance is not a legally binding text, is a recommendation for WHO member states that can be implemented and integrated in the regulatory legally binding process at national, regional level. And in that moment, a careful consideration should be made on the potential impact on the supply chain, on the price, and globally on access. If we go back in time, one of the initial triggers for this document was a G7 call for action that the Access WHO Secretariat we received in May 2021. And at that time, we were already working with Stephanie and Kate on this project. And the G7 called WHO to accelerate some changes to GMP sections that are applicable to waste and wastewater from antimicrobial production. And as WHO Secretariat, we run a global GMP consultation with a feasibility assessment. So to avoid the major disruption to the supply chain, the recommendation was to develop a separate guidance outside GMP, but inspired by its principle. In the guidelines also we outlined the need for a progressive improvement and a reasonable also implementation time for manufacturers to achieve a comprehensive risk management. The guidelines also encourage innovation in manufacturing process and reducing waste. Companies could identify ways to improve efficiency while reducing the overall cost in the long run. So it's an opportunity there. As many countries are tightening also regulation around sustainability and transparency, the guidelines emphasize the need to incentivize green procurement processes. And this can drive also demand and have an impact on vendors favoring greener supplier, even in the presence of higher costs. And we have the example of some member states, like for instance, Germany, UK, that are already implementing this approach. At the end of the day, if multi-drug resistant bacteria are selected in industrial wastewater, the effectiveness of the same antibiotics that are producing in that facilities jeopardized. This is why production must really adhere to robust standards, considering also the global benefit for public health. So reducing environmental pollution, we can have an impact, we can reduce the emergence of drug-resistant bacterial strain with a major impact on the health system globally. In conclusion, the implementation of this guidance is not only about compliance, it's about adopting an holistic approach to responsible pharmaceutical manufacturing. By addressing the environmental concern, we are not only trying to protect the planet, but we're also trying to ensure the continuous efficacy of antibiotics for future generations. Thank you. This is what I say.
Oh, Valeria, that was really nice. I think you answered a few questions we've already seen in the chat, and obviously this is about future generations as well. So thanks so much for concluding with that. And now I'd like to go to Stephanie. So Stephanie, as an inspector, you know the many challenges inspectors face in ensuring quality and safety of medicines. So the question is, what will it take to incorporate waste dimensions into that work? And who needs to do what? So not an easy question, but let's hear what you have to say.
Well, thanks, Bruce. I'd like to give you the perspective of the qualification inspections team, because we perform good manufacturing practices inspections of sites, of manufacturers of health products that are submitted to the WHO qualification program. And these sites include sites that manufacture antibiotics as well as other medicines. So the new guidance is really quite exhaustive. It's very thorough and it has many components to it. And since we are, as an inspectorate, we're working in a resource limited setting, like most inspectorates worldwide. And we perform, active pharmaceutical ingredient site inspections during 2 to 5 days, depending on the complexity of the site and processes. And similarly, for the finished product manufacturing sites, we spend between 3 and 5 days on these sites. And really the scope and focus of our inspections is on, the site's quality management system relating to the production of the active pharmaceutical ingredient or of the finished product. And we focus, we focus really on the aspects that influence the quality of the product, and that's part of our mandate. And our mandate has not yet, is not expanded to environmental aspects. And so the reality is that it is difficult to significantly widen the scope of our inspections without increasing the amount of time that we spend on site. And if we decide like the widening of the scope and thereby increased inspection time will lead to additional operational costs. And we would need to establish who would bear these costs. It should be noted that, I mean, we have already managed to incorporate some limited elements of AMR, of considerations regarding the management of waste from antibiotic production that were published in the GMP points to consider. That was back in April 2020 in the technical report series 1025 Annex 6. And this was sort of the predecessor to this guidance document that we're seeing today. And so we had success in this without increasing inspection time significantly. But the elements that we were covering were much more limited in their scope than in the new guidance. So in view of this, like one of the most feasible options would be to institute a requirement for reliance mostly on the reports from the internal and external audits of the aspects that are described in the guidance, with the strongest reliance given, of course, to the reports from independent auditors or certification bodies that are hired by the manufacturers who will be verifying the full implementation of this guidance. And then we could perform only limited risk-based verifications of very selected, very select elements of the information contained in these reports to verify their integrity and that they have indeed performed what they claim to have performed in terms of tests, etc. But this said, official and final decisions on our approach within qualification still need to be taken and also published. So this said, I mean, I've described our approach as an inspectorate in pre-qualification, but medicines GMP inspectors from different countries worldwide may take a completely different approach on this because of the fact that they're governed by certain laws and regulations that have a very strong, that limit what they can inspect, and how they will also limit how they can implement this guidance. So these laws and regulations will be essentially steering how they decide to take up this guidance, whether it's through environmental bodies or through medicines inspectorates, etc. So yeah, it will really depend on the country. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Stephanie, for, I guess, really giving us a little bit of perspective, on how this, potentially could be integrated into GMP and also some thoughts about verification more broadly. And I think the whole point of these guidelines, it's been said before by Kate and others, but about progressive improvement. So you've already made some steps, and hopefully that's a journey that will continue to be strengthened. So I'd like to I would love to ask you more questions, and I'm sure our audience would, but we don't have so much time. So I'm going to have to just thank you very much for your thoughts, and I'd like to move to the next panel. So if we could give you a warm round of applause, I will, but it's only my lonely voice clapping because everyone's on mute. So thanks very much. So I think with that, we're going to move to the second panel. And so again, this is a really nice continuation of some of the issues that were raised again by the first panel, but also in our questions. We have Washington Dengu, we have Wayne Mueller, we have Steve Brooks, Amit Khurana, and Min Yang. And as you turn your video on, I'll just give folks a one-sentence summary, and hopefully it's a little more accurate than maybe some of the ones I gave before. But Wayne Mueller is the chief auditor at South African Health Products Regulatory Agency. Washington Dengu is currently an African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Program GMP Inspections Coordinator. Steve Brooks currently serves as an advisor to the Antimicrobial Resistance Industry Alliance, and chairs the manufacturing work group of the Alliance. There was a lot of questions on how this guidance aligns with the industry standard, Steve. And then we have Min Yang, and is the director of, I don't know if, oh yeah, there you are. Okay, perfect. Director of National Engineering Research Center for Detoxification and Resource Recovery of Industrial Wastewater at the Research Center for Eco-Environmental Scientists, Chinese Academy of Sciences. So my questions, if you're all ready. And I'm just going to scroll down to the first, and I think it's to you, Wayne, if you're ready. I know you were driving earlier. Hopefully you're settled. And it's actually to Washington as well. So how do you see the audit processes outlined in this guidance operating within existing audit processes? And what else may be required? So we also are asking you about what capacity strengthening efforts will be needed for quality inspections and audits. So again, not an easy question, but over maybe to you, Wayne, to start.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we were driving early on, but both Washington and myself on an audit. So just in terms of probably aligning to what Stephanie has said before, that with this new guidance, this presents some challenges. And I think just to kind of give the background in the sense that we do perform the audits. Focus has been on the quality systems, as was mentioned before, and not that the environmental side of the audit, particularly if you look at, for instance, there's a TRS on hazardous substances. I think it's 957, which deals with the hazardous substances within pharmaceutical manufacture that can occur from time to time. So it's not always that you encounter one of those sites. But what we have attempted to do is, in terms of the audit process, we want to include and have included a section of that where we look at waste streams. In this case, we are specifically speaking about now antibiotics, but in general, we have embedded this waste stream discussion or parameter into our audit process. Now, as when you introduce Washington from the African Medicines Regulatory Organization, so I also work in terms of that organization. So this is the initiative that we are doing on the African continent. So we are developing, or we have developed guidelines with respect to the whole audit process. And so in terms of just before you actually sort of apply the new guidelines, so we do have training that we are rolling out on the African continent, and this will happen from in our new quarter. So we have quarterly training, what we call phase 1 training. This is then rolled out, as I said, on a quarterly basis. And quarter 4, we have included in that program some of the training with regard to the antimicrobial resistance. And now we already have implemented in our harmonized approach to auditing from the African continent and going out to the different areas, different sites in different parts of the world, the concept of waste streams, because I think it starts with that waste streams, whether it be in antibiotic, whether it be in vaccine manufacture, whatever it is. This is important to include in your audit plan. Now, the question, the magic kind of $1,000, $1 million question is, is this being, for instance, this guideline as it is this can this be integrated into your audit plan? Yes, it can. will this add auditing time? This, from the face of it, absolutely yes. And as Stephanie has said before, what about the cost of this? Who's going to bear it, etc.? So I do see the benefits, as you know, from a WHO perspective. Antimicrobial resistance probably in the top 10 threats to mankind, as they say. So it is important that we do integrate that. And I think what we have at the moment is just that from an inspectorate point of view, we need to get everybody on board in terms of the methodology to follow, because I don't think we are there yet.
Yeah.
We are getting there. So those are my comments at this point. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Wayne. We'll go directly to Washington now.
Thank you, Bruce. I'll just pick it up from Wayne, and I'll touch basically on what sort of capacity development is needed to ensure that this guideline comes into life and is implemented very well. I think the basic, I'll start by saying the basic milestone this guideline is going to do for inspectors, particularly from the low to middle income countries, is to raise awareness and consciousness about the aspects of AMR when they are conducting their GMP inspections amongst manufacturers of antibiotic products. With this triggering of awareness about AMR, it can then force them, or it can then encourage or promote them to be able to raise questions towards the responsible handling of antimicrobial residues and waste within manufacturing facilities. So in terms of the capacity that is needed is that we have done such similar exercises trying to implement AMR prevention strategies during GMP inspections. And we have found that I think it is very key that the content that is within the guideline be explained more to inspectors, because inspectors are not much aware of the deep technical issues, particularly with relation to the residual limits of antimicrobial product within the wastewaters. So it is very important to conscientize inspectors in terms of the limits of discharge, and then also performance of the risk assessments at site level. That is very critical, because if the inspectors can understand the methodology of calculating these risk assessments, they can be in better position to implement and promote the calculation of risk from manufacturers. And then I think there is also need to capacitate the ability to collaborate amongst various regulatory authorities, particularly the medicines regulatory authorities and environmental protection agencies, so that they can be able to work together within the context of pharmaceutical manufacturing and liquid and solid waste discharge to integrate antimicrobial resistance perspective in their regulatory authority activities. So I think those two major issues, collaboration, and the second one is interpretation of the discharge limits as well as risk assessments, is going to be very key to ensure that this guideline is implemented smoothly and bring out the outcomes that we so desire from it. Thank you very much, Bruce.
Well, thank you, Washington, and also thank you, Wayne. Really practical, thoughtful comments from your side, and I think sort of positive. It can be done, but also obviously a lot of work on sensitization, capacity building, as you have raised. So thank you both for that look on the ground. So now, Steve, again, lots of comments on how this aligns with the Industry Alliance, but I do want to say it's really great that the Industry Alliance, the AMR Industry Alliance, has stepped up in the last several years to tackle AMR risks through their voluntary initiative, which a few people have been talking about. So the question to you is, how do you see the opportunities for the AMR Industry Alliance initiative to evolve and extend to align with the guidance we're talking about today from WHO and UN Environment? So over to you, Steve. Oh, and I think he's still on mute.
I am. Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. And also, let me start by just congratulating WHO on the production of this guidance. A lot's been said already, and much of what Ramanand said resonated very much with me at the beginning there. As you just said, we've had a long-term commitment to addressing responsible manufacture of antibiotics. In fact, we as an alliance have been at this really since our inception back in 2017. And as many people know, and some people have asked of the panelists, we have an industry standard that's in place, and we have independent certification through the British Standards Institution, so BSI certification. So first of all, I wanted to say that that's very tangible. It's in place. We have currently more than 25 certificates across Europe, Asia, and the US, and many more in the work. So we're really pleased that we've got that traction. And also the approach that we've taken has been adopted by some healthcare systems in their contracting arrangements. So, for example, in some parts of the Nordic region and in the UK's National Health Service subscription model that's just recently been launched, there's recognition of and a preference for the certification that we've developed. So it's really pleasing that much of the guidance that you've developed through your independent expert group is similar to the industry standard. And in fact, I think it's essential because I believe that together we can do more than we can do separately. So I think with your WHO's influence and you know, using the jargon, brand recognition, and I'll call it know-how, because we've been at this for a while. I think there's more we can achieve together. That said, there are some differences between the current standard, which is not going away, by the way. The standard is in place, and certifications are still being undertaken now and will continue to be undertaken. And the reason for that is quite simple. You've already heard through our other speakers that a lot of this guidance has to actually be converted into something that's implementable on the ground, whether that's through, for example, regulation. And I also saw a comment about, well, independent certification is fine. It's kind of voluntary. It's not, if you like, not as robust as, say, regulation. So I'll just comment on that towards the end. But the certification's there. It's in place, and we certainly don't want to take any steps backwards on that because we're trying to drive responsible manufacturing across our supply chains with success. So what's next for us is to understand these differences. There are differences between the draft as it was issued, and we provided extensive commentary on the draft, as you know. So between the draft and the final guidance that's just issued, and between the final guidance and our standard. So what we are committed to doing as industry through the Alliance is to work with WHO and other stakeholders to understand these differences and the implications of those differences, and obviously, work towards a closer alignment of our approaches, so that we can, as I say, achieve more together than we can individually. So just to comment on the comment or question about regulation, we believe that regulation has a place, and certainly regulators can look to the industry standard and can look to the WHO guidance to help inform them of how they may shape regulation. And of course, in most countries, at least, regulation will go through consultation as well. So there'll be opportunities for other stakeholders to help shape what any future regulations might look like. So I think those are my comments. We're, as I say, in summary, pleased to see the guidance issued. We have some work to do, and working with you and others to try and bring our approaches, which are broadly similar, but bring them closer together.
Well, just a big thank you, Steve, for your own thoughts and representing the thoughts of others. And we're obviously looking forward to the journey together and in continuing So I think with that, we have two more perspectives we'd like to hear, very important ones, and I want to make sure we have some time. So I think first we're going to go to Min Yang to hear the Chinese perspective. I don't know if you can hear us okay. I thought you might have had some connection issues, but let's see if we can make this work. My question to you, if you can hear me, is, so what do you see are the key opportunities in China to implement the guidance in terms of technical advancement, for example, for wastewater treatment processes and technologies, and the scale up that may be required? So, and how adherence to good and stringent levels could be achieved. So again, another complicated question that I'll leave in your good hands.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. And so it takes some time to enter in this system, and so now it's okay. So actually, in China, it's the right time, and AMR is becoming a very serious challenge in clinical treatment, and also a hot topic for scientific research. And actually, a lot of scientific research projects have been launched recently. At the same time, the Chinese government is also taking some actions. Antibiotic fermentation residues were officially included in the Directory of National Hazardous Wastes in 2008. And in 2021, China issued the guideline on available techniques of pollution prevention and control for pharmaceutical industry for active pharmaceutical ingredient and preparation categories. And in the industry level, some companies have already taken some measures to reduce the dissemination of antibiotics and the antibiotic resistance during the antibiotic production process by adopting some suitable technologies for the treatment of wastewater and the fermentation residues. And so I believe the issue of the guidance will further accelerate the step of China in taking the suitable actions. And so I'm very glad that as the Chinese expert, both Professor Zhang Yu and me can have the opportunity to the preparation, to participate in the preparation of the guidance, and particularly contribute from the wastewater and the fermentation from the aspect of wastewater treatment and the fermentation residue treatment. So in the future, I believe, I think we can cooperate closely with the pharmaceutical industries and to help them to realize the sustainable development by maximize or by optimize their treatment technologies. Okay, and maybe we can also communicate with the government to try to think about how to regulate some the manufacturing activities, and to ensure that the antibiotics and the MRs can be reduced during the production process. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. These insights from yourself with respect to China is very important, as it's such a big player. And India, of course, is also a big player. And Amit, thank you so much for hanging in there as we get to you, because it's really important to hear from you. And my question is, we understand that there have been efforts to develop and implement regulation on pharmaceutical manufacturing in India in the past. And so the question is, what lessons can be drawn on and considerations made for implementing elements of this guidance through regulatory mechanisms as we move forward? So again, thanks so much for being with us and being our last panelist.
Thanks, Bruce. Let me just congratulate everyone who has worked on this report. I mean, this was much awaited, perhaps the first such to actually address the environmental pollution or antibiotic pollution in the environment on the ground. And I just want to mention that often you see that you have country level guidances, and then an intergovernmental body comes into picture and creates a guidance. Here it is a very different scenario. You have no guidance elsewhere, and then a WHO comes into picture along with many other experts and creates a guidance, which is actually if not universally acceptable, but perhaps would be acceptable to most stakeholders. So now you have one guidance, and that was one question that any policymaker would ask to a scientific regulator, that why would we make regulations or standards? Is there a global guidance? Is there a global standard? Is there a benchmark? And in that context, this guidance really will serve a lot of purpose. Now, the other part, important part from my perspective is that now this lays out a common framework of reference, right? Frame of reference. And the fact that it is backed by an intergovernmental organization like WHO, which many countries look up to for, let's say, scientific or technical guidance with reference to public health, that sets things in a different light now. So what it does to a regulator now, it saves time, it saves effort to bring everybody on the same page. But most importantly, it helps the stakeholders and build consensus around first we need it, and then yes, there is something, and then third, how we can do it. So that part is very well taken care of with this guidance. Now coming to the fact that what in this guidance in particular is useful, I think the first thing to me is that the fact that this is non-binding in a way creates a lot of acceptance. It will create a lot of acceptance because it therefore allows you to contextualize, adapt, modify, choose, figure out what you want to do, what you do not want to do, so on and so forth. So had these been a binding instrument, certainly it would have been much more opposition. So the scale up and the readiness will actually is actually very much benefited by the fact that these are just guidance, but very clearly for a binding instrument if a particular nation wants to move forward. Now, the third part to me is, so what is in this guideline? I would say three things. One, the entire process of regulatory, I would say, controls in this space was about science. The science is complex, and I think this guidance does a lot of justice. It basically tells you all the numbers. It tells you how they are sourced, how they are arrived at, and it tells you what are the references. It also tells you limitations. So now when you have the science correct, the complexity part, it basically clearly lays out everything right in the open. Now you know what you have and what you do not have. Where are the gaps? Where are the possible way outs? The second part is that it addresses multiple stakeholders. So what does at one go? I mean, it's like now a pharmaceutical industry in let's say any country would know what a prospective buyer would need if I have to follow a particular approach and how much I can be incentivized. It also now tells a scientific community person who is trying to figure out what method could be used to analyze or do a surveillance or validate, and that method is not there. So let me now move towards drive my research agenda of my country because this particular antibiotic is produced too much in my country and I need to figure out how that can be controlled, how that can be checked. So it also, for example, helps a civil society actually ask the right question to the regulators. Look, there's this guidance, there's this another guidance. This is the difference. Why are we not approaching this way? Why can't we approach it that way? So it really helps address it, and that basically will mean that it will scale up. It will create incentives. It will have more buy-in. It will have more readiness, more consensus. So I really think that's the second point. The third point is the option of incremental stepwise. That is something that you actually, I would say, a very, very critical part, which will make this a very useful strategy, useful guidelines, and make them implementable. Now you are basically saying, look, if you do this much, it's fine. But if you can do this much, you get incentivized. And that's what will scale it up, will help more readiness again, more consensus and more buy-in. So with that, I end. But I want to congratulate WHO and everyone who has worked on this report. It is very impressive, very comprehensive. It's now actually, we cannot no longer say that environmental dimension of AMR is not really doing much. There's much more now happening. So with that, I submit my case.
Well, thanks, Amit, for your support and encouragement. And I want to thank the whole panel because I think we were overly ambitious, but we kind of had a plan to try to collate some of the questions from the audience. And as you may have seen, there was so many coming in, and we were hoping to take 3 of them, but we actually have no time whatsoever. So what I think I'd like to do is just to thank you and to hand it over to Kate, and maybe she can tell us about a process for the future and including answering some of these questions. So thanks so much to panel 2. Again, we would have loved to have had a broader exchange or a longer exchange with you because they're really incredible insights. So Kate, we've been a victim of our own success, but I'm going to pass over to you.
Yes, and I want to leave time for Jacqueline for her closing too. So just super quickly to say, the next big thing, of course, is the UNGA that I mentioned. Let us kind of gather our breath. We obviously hear a lot of feedback in here that, we need to work with these target audiences for greater sensitization and to learn from that implementation. So that's what we're going to be turning our minds to next. And do keep an eye out for the text of the political declaration, because I think that's going to give us a lot of momentum towards that effort, and also acknowledging we need to be thinking about future updates of this guidance to incorporate that learning down the track. So with that, thank you all, and we hope this is the beginning, sort of not the end with the launch, but the beginning of the next steps.
Okay. Thanks, Kate. And I know you had to kind of give a truncated next steps there. So thanks for being quick. And now it's a real pleasure and honor to introduce Jacqueline Alvarez, who is the Chief of Branch Industry and Economy Division, IED, at UNEP, with over 25 years of experience. And we'll put your bio again in the chat. Thanks so much, Jacqueline, for all the support of UN Environment and for being with us to close this event. Over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you to all. And I have the toughest of the jobs, right? After very, very good interventions by everyone making sense of what we have heard. So good day to all. To start, thank you, Bruce and Kate, for organizing this event. And I'll try to be brief, but I want to highlight some areas, so please bear with me. So we know that for more than 50 years, the presence of pharmaceuticals in the environment is a fact. Only, unfortunately, recently is when this has truly captured global or international attention. In 2015, it was the first time maybe that environmental persistent pharmaceutical pollutants came into the global arena. And it was because of a strategic approach in the chemicals and waste arena, because at the end of the day, pharmaceuticals are chemicals that we use with different circumstances, and they have essential uses. No one can compromise or challenge that, but it's a fact. So that also brought us to discussions on how to address pharmaceuticals. In parallel, as you know, the AMR agenda was growing, and this started with the Secretary General, with some proposals to the Secretary General some years ago. So it is not only an action of few, but as it was mentioned before by some of you, this really needs complete stakeholder collaborations and capturing. So is the presence of pharmaceuticals in the environment compromising ecosystems or compromising the health? And for sure it is. And the first time I heard about how analgesics, for example, or antidepressants were interfering with ecosystems, I was really shocked, because sometimes we tend to think that those chemicals or those pharmaceuticals in a fish will affect only us, but they are also affecting the populations, because the fish feel so comfortable, they are not stressed. And they don't want to reproduce, or they don't want to, in a way, feed themselves, because they are happy as they are. So this is really compromising our food chain, but also because of the presence in their bodies is compromising us. On top, what's happening? That every time we get analysis on environment of presence of pharmaceuticals, these numbers are scaling up. And it's really, in some cases, making us think a lot about how to monitor that, or how do we need to really address. So this guidance in reality has a huge impact, because it's talking about prevention, and it's talking about stopping things from entering into our systems. And when I refer to systems, I refer, of course, both to the environment, but also the animals, the plants that we have, plus ourselves as human beings. So as we bring this critical webinar to close, it is essential to really think of the gravity of the challenge we face. As highlighted, and Ludo said something about the superbugs or bracing for superbugs report, manufacturing of pharmaceutical is critical for antimicrobial resistance, but it's not only that, it's also how we dispose our waste. It's also how we use pesticides and fertilizers for plants and for animals. So we cannot neglect that. So this action is a little piece, very important and extremely relevant for the puzzle that we have to address in the pharmaceuticals as well as in the antimicrobials arena. So this report or this guidance on effluents, which is a joint endeavor somehow between WHO that took the lead and the heavy lifting together with UNEP, is a call to action. But you also know that guidance are starting points. They are not enough if they stand alone. So as we move forward, and there were some questions about how to really move these things, we cannot think of having guidelines without control measures. And I will refer maybe to some of those pollution measures. Procurement processes was mentioned. It's critical, essential how we procure, but regulatory and financial frameworks are also essential. And considerations about extended producer responsibilities and how those, in a way, gaining aspects and funds can be put back, for example, for those that doing inspections, is to be considered. It's a different way of thinking, but we have to start going into that. Why? Because we will avoid higher costs at a later stage. Healthier environments, healthy people, but also less public finance and happier taxpayers. It sounds in a way that we have to create fair level playing fields for everyone, and that's critical. UNGA, United Nations General Assembly, in 2 weeks. You saw in case presentation the red flag in there and all of the other elements that we still need to work towards. 26th of September, put it in your calendar, try to follow those discussions. They are really trying to, the international community and the presidents and the high-level people that will be sitting in that event will be trying to further create maybe a panel to discuss these elements and these things, to really bring the evidence that AMR needs to be focusing on. Targets, yes, we have to have somehow targets, either if they are formally adopted or not, we have to have a north where to go. You know, AMR is one of the 21st century global threats to health. It's number 3. Can you imagine? Number 3. And when I was looking at the report, I said, okay, climate will be the first one. Climate is the 6th. So this is not something we can, in a way, avoid at looking. The forecasts, and you might have read as well, is that by 2050, we can come back to the era before Fleming. Can you imagine? No antibiotics useful for all of us. So let us, all of us, in 2050, say we managed microbes from defeating us, and we learn how to live with them and with antimicrobials in the right way, because we have to be in harmony with them. We cannot fight them. It's like thinking that we can kill all the mosquitoes in the world. We cannot. They will kill us. They will survive after us. So we have to learn how to live in harmony with them. So in closing, let us live today with this renewed sense of purpose and determinations. The actions that we are taking today can really help, and we need those actions to happen. We have all the tools and instruments that we need, even financial perspectives and potential ways forward. So we don't have an excuse to really move with this. So in closing, I really want to thank the WHO colleagues that have been strongly working with us in this topic. And it's not the only area that we work together, and it's always an amazing journey with all of you. So thank you very much. Over.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for that very eloquent closing. Very nice. And so I'd like to now just close the whole webinar, thanking everyone again. Hundreds of people came on for this, and it's a continued journey. As you said, it's not stopping here, and we have some big milestones ahead. So with that, we will close.